broadcasting his online training and then the, I apologize, everyone.
Was the training interesting at all?
Well, it certainly raised my heart rate.
Councillor Carver?
Well, I don't know if we're still in internet limbo out there, but I did have a question pertaining to Councillor Nonis Cross's comments of a minute ago. Shall I wait until
We're good now.
we're good now? Okay. So my question about Councillor Nonis Cross comments is, does the town have any particular special information about this topic that we would want to share with the chamber? I don't know if we do.
Well, they may give us some insight into some advocacy we could do
Yeah,
on their behalf too. So there's
Yeah.
power in numbers, right? And that's why they're doing the consultation. If they're hearing a lot of negative feedback to this, you know, they may reconsider.
okay. Deputy Mayor's got his hand up here.
So in reading the letter, the way I got it was they're asking us for feedback around the approach. If I read the last bit of the letter is we welcome your feedback on this approach and look forward to your comments by Friday. So it's the approach that they're taking in this survey, not necessarily about the service to a certain extent. If maybe I'm wrong. And the thoughts that I had in mind is that all this letter speaks about is economic benefits of the ferry. It doesn't, that's what they would be looking into. And then so it's a case of numbers and things like that. But it doesn't look at the cost benefit of investing $500,000 over a period of time, that money could have been used for something else, or the spill-off benefits from a mental health and just community flourishing perspective. Those things are not being factored in. So from my perspective, this will be a very narrowed and limited view as to what the impact of the ferry actually is overall, if we just look at the numbers. And maybe that's something we might want to speak about. Maybe I'm by myself on that piece, but I think if they're going to actually invest any kind of money in looking at it, they should do a comprehensive look rather than just pick numbers that can be used to say yes or nay on the topic, but actually really look into it. Then they can make a good decision rather than one that's based on fulfilling a political agenda from my perspective.
Okay. Any other comments? CAO, is this something that you Wayne or your staff can look at and make a recommendation? I mean, I realize it's a short timeline, but.
Yeah, I mean, not only is there no time to do that, but also this is, I think that the deputy mayor's point, like if they're really just looking for feedback, like off the cuff feedback, the type of thing that the deputy mayor has just suggested would fall into that category. So staff really can't, we don't really have much to add in terms of research or anything.
I mean, short of saying thank you for your letter, we look forward to your, ongoing consultation.
Yeah.
We'd appreciate if you talk to the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much, Dylan Hyde. I mean, I don't think honestly, from a town council perspective, we want to, weigh in and become advocates for this very expensive government policy that it's in the eye of the beholder about how beneficial it's been. But well, I mean, it's unusual. Like I'll be frank. I've not seen a letter like this where we're being asked to really weigh in, other than through something we would say would be something associated with a proclamation or a request for support. And traditionally we've tried to stick to our knitting, and this is clearly 100% of a provincial mandate. And while we may have personal opinions from a council perspective, I'm not sure what more we can do here.
Councillor Owens Croft, you wanna?
Well, they do, say the long-term impact that this may have. And we did see a lot of impact when it was canceled before. Things have changed too, so it looks like they're going to be hiring a firm to carry out this work. So I think to have us inclusive on any communication to update us on any consultation that will be taking place in this area. Because even if we're not making a submission, it will be good for us to hear what other people, what our business community, our accommodations people are, you know, how this will affect them, the arts community. I think the big buyers come over on the ferry, who buy the big ticket items that normally you and I going around to some of the arts community don't buy. Those are just experiences I've had in the past. But, you know, we did see after the during the pandemic, our area was booming with just Nova Scotians coming to our community too. So, you know, there's lots to think about, you know, when you see the amount of money.
What is the wish of council?
Mayor, I think we should respond, Heather, under your banner or the CAOs. Thank them for the letter and ask to be kept apprised of their ongoing consultations. And if they want to consult with us more about our personal opinions, then we're happy if any government official may be interested in our thoughts.
You want a motion?
So, yeah, the most expeditious thing would just be to say, move the staff respond indicating an interest in being kept up to date. And if you want to reference the importance of hearing from our chamber, you can put that in there, or you can leave that out, that emotion. But I think just saying staff would respond, because I think it's looking for an email, so we don't have to make it.
Yeah, email, yes.
Awesome.
Seconded, you heard the motion. On the question. All in favor, motion's carried. Thank you.
Not bad, Mayor. 45 minutes. We're through correspondence.
That's pretty good.
We're cruising.
And there was nothing in the information item folder, so we've done really well.
Not going to be playing by Maureen for the length of this meeting.
Staff reports to council, February 7th, it's the start of the month. This is the easy one for the CAO. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Carver.
Under the staff assignments, the 6.4, the strategic plan, I just had a question about, my note says, the Climate and Environment Committee has already discussed the strategic plan. And so will there be an opportunity for those comments? I mean, they haven't written a letter back to council or made a recommendation to council, but will that discussion be reflected when the strategic plan is reviewed?
So I can speak to that, but are you referring to an item on the report to council, or are you
Yeah,
just
it was
referring to staff
under
report?
the council assignments. 6.
Well, 6.4 is a staff.
Oh,
report.
6.4, sorry.
I just, yeah,
Right.
so I didn't know if you wanted to hold for number 6.4.
That's right, it was
Yeah.
item 6.4. Thank you so much.
No problem. I was still, I could speak to it. I'm sure it does come up on the staff report somehow, but
Yeah,
I'll
perfect.
wait.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions about the staff report?
Mayor, I move that we accept the staff report
For
for
information.
information. Thank
Thank
you.
you, seconded by Councillor Now. On the motion, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the Marina Wharf staff report.
So this was a deferral from the previous meeting. I'm not going to walk through the whole report, but it does provide for options, and obviously they're very substantial budget conversations will be entailed. So the recommendation there was the replacement of the pumping unit, which is an associated capital item we previously covered, and repairs to the boardwalk area, along with capital repairs, which is the main part of this report, to the 2023-24 budget. So that's the recommendation of staff.
Councillor Carver,
So moved.
we have a seconder. Councillor Feeney, on the question. Is it just the pump unit and they're gonna keep the big stainless tank?
That's a conversation that we'll have between now and budget with the marina, just to clarify what we would need to put in the budget.
Yeah, but if they're gonna replace the whole unit. I doubt if they'll do it for $12,000.
Commission, just as an aside, in conversations with Keith, the tank is fine.
Yes, stainless. I
So
mean, it's-
I agree with this.
Yeah, it's a great item. I would not want to put a new pump unit on one of the original suppliers tanks, which we had a lot of trouble with, which is why we had the stainless one built, so.
And I know that the pumping unit came at the request of the society, so, you know, I'm sure
Yeah,
to Councillor Wilson's point, they know what they need there. And I'm not here to second guess that, but I do think we should discuss it in the context of the other capital items for the agreement.
Mayor, did have a chance to talk with Angela Bugden, who is in Lunenburg at the Fishers Museum, and they're going through, you know, extensive work repairs, and they've got a tremendous amount of experience with that kind of infrastructure. And I guess her opinion was that the budget seemed completely reasonable. She wasn't surprised at all by these kinds of costs. Looks like nobody's surprised by the numbers.
like
It's-
the quick work numbers. or
just-
are we talking
yeah, all of the-
pumping system?
just the crib work and all of the rest. So I think as we have this conversation about the timing and the sequencing, I mean, I think it wishing the costs are lower isn't going to make it so, because it seems like the people who know the most about these things are agreeing that this is the kind of sticker price to do these types of repairs. So I'm not sure, I'm sure we'll have a full conversation between now and the end of the budget deliberation period. But we really do need to probably provide the Wheaton Boat Society with some guidance about what our plan, what our thinking is at some point later this year, I guess.
And I'll be meeting with them between now and the budget as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I lost my picture of the deputy mayor.
Oh,
No question. Okay,
still on my page.
He's down the bottom of my page. You can
It's very
Yeah.
low.
yeah. But when I go to the agenda to look at the item,
Oh,
I lose my picture of the group. Okay, so we've got a motion on the table. On the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the fire department purchases. Everybody's buying stuff.
No big ticket items, but this is one that council's been working towards for quite a while, and I know the department has been waiting for quite a while. So this report concludes the tendering process, at least from staff perspective, with respect to the purchase of a new pumper truck. 3 bids were received. They're presented here just based on the total price, all-in pricing. These were reviewed by the department and on the recommendation of Chief Eakins and the truck committee. We are recommending council approve the proposal from Hub, which is the lowest price proposal. So that part is obvious here. And then included in the same recommendation, the same report is the second recommendation with respect to retroactively approving the budget exceedance for the purchase of SCBA packs and bottles, which are budgeted for 40,000 and cost 67,200. So if there's any questions about those recommendations, I'm happy to take them.
Councilor Rose.
Just a minor, well, it's not so minor, I suppose. Could we, in the price of the pumper truck, could we take out the one that's fourth from the right?
Yes, that would be pricey. Thank you.
Just one question, Dylan. So on the SCBA, so our total capital budget for various equipment was about 76,000 for the year. I take it that we're just taking the 40. So we had 40 on a bucket of 76. And what you're suggesting is we're just gonna allocate that 76 just to this. So the other odds and ends that comprise the full budget, are we deferring until next fiscal year? I think there were like helmets and bunker
The
equipment.
intention wasn't necessarily to defer. The intention was just to acknowledge that these are all reserve paid and that the balance of the equipment reserve is there. And whether we defer them to next year or buy them now, ultimately, we're gonna buy the exact same stuff, probably at a higher price. So really, this is more of a recommendation that we allow for an additional draw on the reserve for the SCBA equipment, not exclusive of the other plans.
So fair enough. So the other line items under fire services capital, we still plan on proceeding with those before the end of March.
That's my understanding. I mean, all these
Okay.
purchases are coming through the department in terms of what they need. But my understanding is we either have or intended to proceed with all of the budgeted initiatives there under fire.
Okay.
Kelly was first.
We're just wondering, this budget was presented in July, June. So is there a particular reason why the cost of these gizmos is roughly double what it was 6-7 months ago?
Big cost, big difference. If we ordered these early to get in January, there was a big price jump coming up, probably about $8,000 a pack, more increase coming. So that's why we jumped ahead and ordered these now to avoid that price increase. And this other was a price increase that we, how they went up.
But as to whether we obtained quotations, at what point that the prior estimates were based on, they could have been outdated from 2021.
Yeah.
So we may be
They
looking
probably
at
were.
a previous year's rate increase that happened before the budget, and the numbers didn't get updated for this year's budget, which it does sometimes happen, unfortunately.
So at the end of the day, for this calendar, this fiscal year, we're gonna spend like 76 plus, what is that, 35, 115,000 on fire hall capital, equipment capital.
Yeah, I mean, the budget had the purchase of the rescue truck also as a equipment.
Coming out of the equipment,
Yeah.
I assume.
So we'd have a discussion to have at the end of the year, whether we will still do that or whether we'll borrow for that. I mean, we still have an entitlement to borrow for that, but the reserve balance is there. We can afford it. It's just a question of how far we draw it down.
And that was around how much was that?
Yeah, the budget was 200. I think it came to just under 200.
Yes.
Okay, and we had a reserve at around 350. So, okay.
And
Councilor Owens-Cross.
I'm just curious, where are we in the cycle for the municipal grants for safety equipment?
We have obtained it, I think, for 1 year from being able to obtain it
Yeah, I think
again.
this year coming up.
Yeah, I think so.
Starting March onward.
I know the department won't let us forget to get in there. Yeah.
Because we had mentioned that before, and I think we're 1 year, I think starting in March is when our year comes up.
Okay.
So
So
I was looking for
we
this year's budget,
$20,000.
but I was looking at this year's budget, we'll have to make sure we get.
And like I say, we thought of leaving this until that point, but with the big increase coming, it would have eaten that up plus some.
Well, if there's anything we
Yeah,
haven't
so-
bought yet with respect to helmets and et cetera, then we could always
Yeah.
contemplate pushing that
Yeah.
into next year to apply for.
And whether the helmets get ordered before the end of March or not,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a good question.
Okay. Councilor Wilson,
We don't have a motion yet, do we?
don't think.
Can I move the council approve the acceptance of the HUB fire engine and equipment limited proposal for the supply of a new pumper truck for the Mahone Bay and District Fire Department priced at $1,170,632 plus taxes. And further, the council approved the purchase of SCBA packs and bottles from Cummings Fire and Safety Equipment for $67,200 plus taxes.
Doesn't hurt when you say it fast.
I don't even notice
I
it.
think in the,
Councilor Carver,
Second.
all right, moved and seconded.
I think in the proposed recommendation here, they got one too many ones in there in their
Yeah.
price.
Yeah.
Julie,
Councilor Wilson got that one.
and it did not appear in my motion.
No.
No.
Okay. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. The fire, the helmets, Texaco gives them away.
Is this,
We have a bunch of plastic ones then.
is this pumper truck gonna be lime green and yellow?
No. Is that what you wanted?
Yeah.
We could have put that in the motion.
Could have.
Have a chance.
I should.
You know,
What has to happen with that, Dylan? Do we just put in the purchase order and wait? To
Yeah,
18,
so
what's
the
the
estimated
cadence?
delivery is 24-month turnaround.
Okay.
We have a timeline in there where the chassis will be ordered and delivered to Hub. Because it's coming from an external supplier, and then when they're doing modifications and the pricing is linked to that. So we don't pay anything until the chassis arrives to them, and then we pay a portion of the total cost. And so it will essentially be a 2-year capital project with cash flow. And
Mhm.
it did note in the report that you mentioned this, that we will probably want to talk about that cash flow for next year.
Mhm.
Because by the end of next year, we won't have a truck, but we quite likely will end the year more than $1 million in on the truck.
Mhm.
And there is, like, we usually get a line of credit if it's a building. So we may want to contemplate that, but obviously if we can carry it, better to carry it, cheaper to carry it. So we'll just, actually, we'll run the scenarios for that, but it's a good point, is we haven't decided yet.
So this is winter 2025. We expect, or Christmas 2024, somewhere in that range.
Well, if we'd had the purchase order in by Friday gone, they said it would have been Christmas of 2024.
Okay.
But now it's gonna be a few months after that, so probably February, March of 2025, I'm thinking. Because they're saying 22 to 24 months delivery.
And who knows, it might get here sooner, but it won't get here. We'll get here
A
later.
lot of that will depend on the
Supply.
arrival of the chassis. And that's what we have to pay for the chassis when it arrives, so.
Okay,
All right.
let's go to draft public engagement plan. Councillor Kerr.
So this is where I have my question under 6.4. About the input from a committee to the strategic plan review. Because the Climate and Environment Committee has already discussed the strategic plan and relationship to the climate action plan. And I just wanted to be assured that that discussion will somehow get folded into that review process.
So there's a couple of ways that it can, based on the timeline presented here. My thought was that probably part of what Lauren was taken away from the last meeting was that she would draft up the committee's shared perspective with respect to the strategic plan, and the committee would then at their next meeting approve the submission of that. The next meeting is before the cutoff for written submissions. It's very late, it's after hearing.
Yeah.
But because this is a town committee, certainly providing a written submission will still come in under the line and therefore be included in the report that goes to council.
Okay. Excellent. I have another comment, if I may.
Sure.
I was interested in the idea of the use of the code red for as part of the public engagement, and my intuitive reaction was that I didn't think that was a very good idea, using code red for this purpose. I'm just basing that on my own reaction when the code red comes in. It seems the wrong level of signal for this particular.
So we have, and I know Mo can elaborate on this, but we have actually under the code red policy, a couple of different levels.
Mhm.
So when you sign up, you can choose to sign up for what are called community notices from the town. And then we have used that to put out notices about like the UARB hearing, like any sort of things that we want people to know about. But you have to voluntarily sign up saying, I want to receive these notices that are not about service outages, that are entirely just for community events and such. So, I get them because I get all the messages. I'm not sure how many people have signed up for that. But those who have done so intentionally. It's not going to go to everybody. Sort of akin to Facebook. I haven't signed up for Facebook. If I wanted to get the notices on Facebook, I could sign up for Facebook.
So, readable code red.
Okay, sorry. Just on that point, that is actually a conversation that we received communication from the public about that. I'm not on Facebook, so how do I get the same information? So that is certainly something we've been able to say. We have code red for.
It's going to be that dozen of us that don't have Facebook still down.
Both of you.
Yeah.
Councillor Owens-Scott.
I'm just wondering if maybe we could put in the newsletter when we do our code red on a regular basis, that people who want to upgrade to the communication plan may contact, how they can contact and go on it. Because, I signed up quite a long time ago. I'm not even sure if what level I have, so it may be a good time for people to even find out what they have in there.
So we add that to the March newsletter as a, okay. Good way to reach people. Any other questions on the public engagement plan?
So, although there's no recommendation part to these, the recommendation is always assumed to be the council accept or approve the public engagement plan as presented.
Someone,
Thank you, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Lawrence Croft. Each you by 10 seconds. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the Community Solar Garden monthly update.
So these are just informational items provided by area for the general viewing public and also members of council. If anyone has any questions, I probably can't answer them on the spot, but I can take them back to Lenta as project manager.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Carver, and then Councillor Lawrence Croft.
Yeah, I had asked by email what a sample solar module table was and what the golden tables are. So I'll look forward to hearing.
Yeah, and so I did have I briefly was talking with Linda, so I did raise this. So the golden table I know from prior conversation had to do with setting up like an example of what these tables would look like. So why that is distinct from the other phrasing you use, it would sound like they're synonymous. That I wasn't clear on enough.
Golden tables.
Yeah,
That's what-
but I believe it was just, representative, essentially representative setup. And of course, now they're all in place.
Okay, Councillor Lawrence Croft.
Yeah, I saw somewhere, and I think it was on this report that, because it was December, and I questioned, there were no environmental concerns. Is that on, or was it on the staff report on the solar garden? Yeah, and I just thought, has all the water issues at
So it's the health and environment report.
Yeah.
Well, so they're looking at this in terms of something that's actually been like filed with the Department of Environment and exceedancy, some issue that has been reported. So, we didn't have those huge rainstorms in December.
Okay.
So there were stormwater issues, but I don't think any that rose to the level of
of
a new
January?
report. Yeah. I
Okay,
can't say that what this will say for January, but it may, because I know at least one resident did reach out to environment around sediment discharge into the harbor. And they were pleased by our response. Of course, it's sediment. It's got nothing to do with the waste facility. It wasn't coming out of that effluent pipe or anything. It was just a little bit of sediment coming off of the construction site down the roadside ditch and into the harbor. And that was investigated and found not to be a health concern. But that's the sort of thing where maybe that would come up on this report. We'll just have to see next month.
oh, okay, that was my question about that.
Okay. Anyone else?
is this the point at which we were to discuss the Sampson letter?
That's the next one.
The next one,
Oh, okay.
that's why I was scared I was
Linda's
getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, okay,
We
good.
don't have to do anything with that report.
Somebody had to do it. So,
So let's go to the Prochaine. The Solar Garden Stormwater Update.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a report provided by area, just basically summary of recent stormwater events and the context for them in terms of recent rainfall and how they've been managed. We're quick to acknowledge that this has been a very unusual last month in terms of rainfall, and I think that's very well demonstrated here in the report. But we do follow up on every complaint, every issue that comes in. Lenta and the GP Jewel team have been, very closely working with adjacent properties that have been impacted. Always putting additional bales of hay in and additional fencing and doing what they need to do to respond to issues as they arise. So the recommendation that's provided here is to direct town and area staff to continue to dialogue with Mr. Sampson and other neighboring, I will add, other neighboring properties to work with them to best manage site runoff. We did have a concern from one of the other neighboring properties in the most recent very, very heavy rains. we had Marsh Justin come in to take a look at the situation, that they didn't find a direct relationship between our project site and the flooding issue. But we do continue to respond very quickly to those, and with council's support, we'll continue to do so. So that's our recommendation. But obviously, we also had the correspondence that people may wish to discuss.
Councillor Carver.
I think we all recognize that the rain in January was very, very unusual. And also the construction site's still very raw. And do we anticipate that with the regrowth of vegetation and the planned vegetation, that the runoff will be diminished? Is it right to anticipate that that will be the case?
Yeah, I think it's correct to anticipate that. I mean, we'll see at the end of the day what happens. We do expect heavy rain events in the future. So while this is an exception looking back historically, it may not be an exception going forward. Sediment control will be vastly improved by plant coverage. So, the level of rain coming down, the volumes will continue to rise, and it's not realistic to expect that the site can completely eliminate that. Even if there were no solar panels there, rainwater would obviously come down the hill. But in terms of the sediment issues and in terms of some of the way that can create channeling, which further speeds up the flow of water, those issues should be substantially addressed with the seeding and completion of landscaping for the property.
So is there any plan in the near future of doing some more changes down there to alleviate some of these problems that Mr. Sampson's having? I mean, I thought we had received a report back further that the plan that they had in place was going to eliminate that, and then all of a sudden, his property has been severely damaged. And I think we have to, try to get that remedied ASAP, because we're gonna get more heavy rains.
Well, I mean, I guess, that's where I already specified that we do continue to work with them on an ongoing basis. So, I'm not here to present a recommendation that will eliminate stormwater impacts on neighboring property. I don't think we have the ability to do that. All we can do is continue to work with them. We have in the past made material improvements to their property to address damage that has occurred. But that can only happen after the fact. Unfortunately, remediation is a part of the solution here. So, damage likely will continue to occur over the next couple of months if we get these heavy rains, and we'll continue to work with them to mitigate it, and then we will work with them to remediate it. But, it is very difficult to talk about remediation of an ongoing issue while the source of that issue remains. The remediation would typically follow that process. So, I think staff consider ourselves to be working closely to the extent that we're able, and we'll continue obviously to bring recommendations to council if there's anything that we don't feel we've already been empowered to do under the approved stormwater management plan the council approved last summer.
Okay, Deputy Mayor's been waiting with his hand up. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm just there's a couple of concerns that I have with the report we got from Lenta, and bouncing it against the letter from Mr. Sampson. In terms of cadence, I don't know which one came first, and so the report that we got from Lenta doesn't actually really address some of the stuff in detail for us as council to actually know what was being done. Says they've been working with the neighbors to address things, but we don't know what actually has been done and what has not. And my concern is that the letter actually lays out his concerns, and on our side, there is no clear public record around what we have done. So I don't know how we can, and maybe that's not a concern for the rest of council, but I think for me it's a concern, especially if the threat that is in the letter eventually comes to be that will be taken to court. And so it's sort of in the court of public opinion, seems like we are not doing anything. And I'm not sure that that's the actual true picture. So we need to show what we've been doing and how we've been affecting things. I understand that the weather has had a significant impact, but we can still do some things that actually try and alleviate the problem. When the stormwater management report came to council, I was under the belief that actually these things could not potentially happen, even if we had a rain event or the kind of rain we were having. And so I'm a little bit concerned that actually that stormwater management plan is not as robust as we thought it was. And so maybe I'm wrong on that, but based on what we approved as a stormwater management plan, I didn't expect this to actually be happening now. And so that's a concern for me, and I think we need to find ways to address it.
Councillor?
I think Mr. Sampson did ask to speak to address it with council. Do we do that on a regular basis, or is it only staff? You know, we've gone. Does anyone go on site from council? I'm just curious as to how you deal with that. Usually, you know.
So staff have an ongoing dialogue. Council normally don't deal with operational matters directly as individual members. There was back last year at this time a structure that was created essentially to speak with the neighboring property owners, where the mayor and deputy mayor were appointed to represent council in meeting with them to hear their concerns. So that may be a structure we would consider. In this case, I don't feel there's any information that we're not aware of or that is not being conveyed to council, but obviously listening actively, being available to listen has its own benefits, even if we're not gaining new information by that. So if council maybe wants to consider the process that we had in place last year, that would be an option. But there is no regular structure or ongoing meetings between council and the individuals.
I mean, I have to think that if that was my property, how I would feel. And I would really appreciate someone coming and taking a look and affirming my concerns. And that's a lot of water. If you've got a young child in that area, they could have got washed away, you know. I just feel we should be showing more concern.
Councillor Wilson?
As most people on staff know, I was there during that rainstorm. And in fact, as a result, I visited from our local constabulary. But I can say, I would like to just point out that the water, the works that's been done up there to get the water off site safely, the 16-inch culvert was running absolutely full when I was up there. And it couldn't handle, it was impossible for it to handle any more water. And that's a lot of water. And it was all running down both sides of the ditch of the main road. So, I mean, what they've done, I think, did what it was supposed to do, but it just couldn't do it all. And yes, it was a bit of a mess in Tony's backyard. I appreciate that. And it will have to be repaired at some point. But I mean, I think it's incorrect to say that we couldn't do more, but I think reasonably we've done a pretty good job. And I think we just have to see what comes. I did have a question on that. Do we know when we're going to be seeding that property?
I don't know exactly what's planned. I can check with Lenta on that.
Because that, I think, will be key.
Certainly the silting that happened was, you know, we did have an extreme rainfall and there's no frost in the ground. So what's left there is at the mercy of the rains, and they were that intense that there was a lot of runoff.
And I guess just to Councillor Lona-Scrouton and Councillor Wilson's points about, you know, we have an acknowledgement from Mr. Sampson in his letter that spring will, you know, as he says, God willing, be the opportunity for a more permanent remediation of damage. So, you know, on one hand, we've got ongoing drainage issues that are being managed, and as Councillor Wilson said, it's a challenge. We continue to do our best. I'm sure lessons have been learned and will be taken into account by our contractor. But, you know, really what I think we're being asked to consider is the long-term remediation and addressing the issue come spring, and hopefully come an end to the constant ongoing issue. And certainly do not feel the council has seen the last of that. The motion here was intended to speak to the time between now and such a time as remediation can be undertaken. And I'm sure that there will be a conversation about the nature of that remediation work, and I'm sure Mr. Sampson is eager to hear from council in that regard. It is premature, though, to talk about remediation until such a time as it can be undertaken.
Councillor Feeny?
Mayor, but we just couldn't have more bad luck
No,
on this particular file. I think that the salient point now is that council has relied recently on the promises of the storm water management plan for the site. And I think our message back to the homeowners needs to be, you know, while I'm not an engineer, I think that the message we heard from Councilor Wilson rings true. If more is required, I think council will support more being done, whatever that may be. If we require the 16-inch lines to be turned into 24-inch lines, that'll happen. Whatever the engineers tell us we need to do, we'll support that as a council. And in due course, I'm assuming there'll either be a final, when the project gets further along, I think is the CAO's point, we'll have a better understanding of the limitations of the existing stormwater management plan. And we'll know, is it up to snuff or do we need to do more? I guess the question is, when is that, when will we know that? And I'm assuming we'll know that by next fall at the latest. And then we'll either have to spend what it's going to take to make sure that the current plan is augmented, or in the fullness of time and with the rest of the landscaping and the rest of the planning, that coupled with the engineering that's in place now will be sufficient. But no one really knows.
and then we'll get a big rainstorm.
But I do think the message back to the Sampsons is that we are paying attention to these letters. And we're going to get through it, and in the fullness of time, they'll be satisfied with where we end up. I don't think we can do anything more than that, other than, you know, I don't think there's going to be a requirement to take us to court, because as a council, we're going to support staff's recommendation for engineering improvements if that's what the recommendation is. So at this point, I think it's good that the Sampsons wrote the letter and posted the video. I think the video is really illuminating, and it was helpful. And all we can do now is hope that we can get through the other end of the project and things improve. But because I think we'll all agree what we saw there last week's not, that can't continue forever. I mean, inevitably it needs to get fixed.
Do you think Mr. Sampson is aware that council is committed to finding a solution? And that we are going to make the fixes on his property that.
I guess all I can say is I think that he, you know, between prior communications and obviously this meeting being on YouTube, I don't think there's any lack of clarity around council's intentions.
Okay.
However, you know, commitment, hard monetary commitment obviously remains to happen. And I think the question for the affected property owners is just to, you know, will you trust the council has your interest in mind and will work with you through the course of this and will remediate it? And you know, ultimately I can't say whether they believe that, but I think we've been very clear that that is our intention. And I think, you know, you can add further to this motion, to Councillor Feeney's point. I don't think it hurts to say, you know, on one hand, we'll do this motion, council direct staff to continue to work with him with ongoing issues with respect to site runoff. You can also say separately that staff be directed to review the stormwater management plan for the community solar garden site and bring recommendations to council as you know, as they see fit. And I think, you know, those show definitive response action. And as far as the dialogue, you know, we remain here. You can write another letter to the next meeting. You can come in ahead of the meeting. We remain open to that continuing council level conversation, and obviously staff will be speaking with him every week. He did note that he has heard from us a lot of, we're sorry, we're doing our best, and I'm sure he will continue to hear that from us. And we really are doing our best. I know Lenta, you know, she does everything she possibly can when these issues arise, and is very, very conscious of them.
I think that's a good edit on the
Yeah,
motion.
yeah.
Can't recall who made the motion at this point, but
I don't think anyone has.
Don't
I
say
don't
it.
know,
Uh,
but I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I'll second it.
And Maureen, are you?
clerk, can you read there?
No, sorry.
Well, and we add, I presume, Suzanne, that this is including.
Yeah,
yes,
including
yeah,
the-
I think that's.
That council direct staff and area staff to continue the dialogue with Mr. Sampson and work with him to best manage site runoff, and
And
then,
then this becomes one of those hybrid and that, and we'll just say, you know, that way we can record the other part of it, because one thing will happen right away. And that staff be directed to review the approved stormwater management plan for the solar garden site and bring recommendations for its further improvement to council.
Okay, Suzanne, you are-
And should we add on an ongoing basis? Should we have
I-
regular updates? Or will that be in the staff reports?
I think just in
Or
order
the
to give
area
us something we
report.
can come back on, we'll just say,
Okay.
do a review. It may not be the last review.
Right.
But I think what we'll probably do is we'll end up bringing the review in April. So it'll be underway now, and then we'll bring a review at such a time as hopefully we're able to turn the corner on this current weather, although hoping that spring is less rainy in Nova Scotia. So, yeah,
there you go. Okay,
I think as Tony
make
said.
that
dog
motion?
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder? Counselor Now? On the question? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, get your hand up. Is that on the
Yeah,
question, sir?
Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while.
Yeah.
I support the motion, but I had a question around, so in the letter it suggested that there can be a short-term fix for the winter. And I was wondering whether that has been explored or not.
I mean, I guess to my knowledge, we've been open to any suggestions about a fix. I guess I'll relay to Lenta that if there is something that Tony has in mind that he sees as a short-term fix, we would certainly be willing to look at that. To my knowledge, we've never heard something that we've turned away from.
Okay, so basically you're not sure whether that's been explored or not.
No, I'm not sure, but we would always explore it if there is an option.
Okay.
Counselor Carter. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Just going back to previous references to how council can connect with Mr. Sampson. And I think there's been mention that he and Ms. Walsh could come to a public input session if they wished, or they could book themselves into a presentation slot for more direct connection with council. Those are options.
Okay. Counselor King.
I mean, Mayor, I think as the CAO pointed out, we decided at a moment in time to, leave the direct correspondence between you and the deputy mayor and the Sampsons. But in the fullness of time, and with other issues now resolved, I don't see a reason to Councillor Lona's Cross point. We can certainly have a site visit if they prefer. Like if it's more convenient for us to go to them, I'm sure we can accommodate that request at this point.
I think it would be useful to reinforce the notion that council are listening to his dilemma, his descriptions, and that we are committed to doing something about it. Deputy Mayor, are you on side with maybe doing a site visit?
Yeah, I can go for a site visit. I'll be honest and say at this point, the question I asked about what they've offered and whether that's been explored, for me was pointed in the case that that's in the letter. The letter has been here for a while. If that has not been explored by the CEO and staff, I'm I'm a bit concerned about their response time to Mr. Sampson at this point. And so there are things that me and you can do, but there are things that staff, before we get into a conversation about what needs to be done, that needed to be addressed. So I was hoping that that would have been explored, and we'd have a maybe no, whatever option was given cannot be done, would have been very helpful at this meeting. So I'm a bit concerned about that.
Yes, yeah.
So I guess as far as that goes, we're having a conversation about limits of council and staff and operational matters. This is a great example. This letter was written to council by someone who feels council will best address operational concerns. It makes it very difficult for staff then to precede council with respect to consideration of the subject. Tony's aware that we know that he has written us a letter. That wasn't a step that was necessary for him to take if he wanted to bring a suggestion through to staff. That was something he could do directly. He has done directly in the past. So this was a letter to council, and it would be appropriate to respect council's jurisdiction by receiving the letter before dealing with the substance of it. So I think the further we encourage a staff level dialogue, the easier it will be to resolve issues operationally. And the further we go towards creating a separate council dialogue, then the more difficult it will be for staff to directly resolve these issues at the level of staff. So I think this actually brings up a challenge that is inherent with this. What's the harm in having two separate conversations? Well, I think that is the harm. Is the efficacy of an immediate response gets clouded by having two separate conversations. But I do take your point, Deputy Mayor, and we'll be reaching out to Tony after council's consideration of the letter tonight.
This is the mayor. The point was that I think there was some suggestion of an invitation from council to the Sampson and Sampson Walsh just to join us here at the council chambers. All I'm suggesting is that, you know, they're certainly more than welcome to avail themselves of that opportunity. But conversely, like, I think as a council, we'd be happy to go to their turf if they prefer. It's just, you know, how to communicate that is I think is worth
I think as far as the site visit option, we should just have Lenta relay that, you know, we're quite willing to have a site visit for members of council if that's something that we're being invited to do.
Yeah.
And I made a note that she can include that in the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Feeney. Anything else? We've had our vote on the motion. Okay, let's go to 6.7, winter 2023, the transportation update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess this is becoming a periodic, I won't say quarterly, but we've got so many different transportation initiatives going on that it is necessary to provide a report from time to time. The last one was provided in September of 2022, and before that, October of 2021. This report summarizes a number of ongoing transportation improvements, particularly coming down to a couple of recommendations. So most of it is for information. There are two recommendations inherent here. One concerns the council's previous direction to reconfigure the intersection of Pleasant Street and Main Street as a three-way stop, and staff's recommendation that we instead proceed with reconfiguration to tee up the intersection, but leave it as essentially one-way stop on Pleasant. And the other recommendation is that staff be directed to carry out an assessment of the location of accessible parking spaces and no parking zones, and bring a report to council in this regard prior to the issuance of the 2023 painting tender. Most of our painting is conducted externally, you know, all of it theoretically, unless we miss something, and at one time, you know, each year. So any changes will need to be taken up there, but I think we have a great opportunity now with the accessibility plan coming to fruition to do a quick review, figure out if there's some immediate improvements. So those are two recommendations. There's a bunch of other stuff in there for information I'm happy to answer questions on.
Councillor?
Yes, I'm not as up to speed on this plan with the savings fee, so I'm looking for clarification. What will happen with the entrance and exit at the savings fee? Like, that will be some
So
interference.
that was one of the biggest reasons why staff couldn't make the three-way stop direction work.
Okay.
Because essentially it immediately jams up the entrance and exit from the independent store. And the only solution we could find to that was a reconfiguration. We'd actually put a different, like you'd move the entrance exit on the independent store. But because of the use of the parking lot by transport trucks, having like a central in out at a stop, which is a configuration that you'll find in other places with respect to a parking lot like that, would make it very challenging for the trucks to get their delivery.
Right.
So I think for a variety of reasons, it just wouldn't be possible. Also, when we did briefly look at the option of moving the in out to go directly across from Pleasant to the parking area, that's where the sort of main
Oh, yeah.
power
Yeah.
pole that every line in town seems to come in. It's not just ours, it's the communications lines as well. So when I asked Phil about that, I mean, it's possible, but you know, he's with quite a lot of trouble, and given everything else, it didn't seem like it would be necessary to achieve council's objectives. So that's where we came to this alternative conclusion.
Councillor Wilson.
With regard to the Pleasant Street intersection, I'm fine with this idea, but one of the biggest problems with that stop sign is lack of visibility to the right.
With the, yeah,
And one of the possible solutions to that problem would be to eliminate 2 of the parking spots as they currently exist.
right in front of the,
Well, toward the
Towards the
bank,
yeah, out towards.
just to give people a better chance at seeing oncoming traffic.
Yeah,
And while I'm on the subject of parking, and really has nothing to do with this, but I'd like to suggest we make a note that the parking right in front of, I guess it's the Pentecostal church, where the monument is,
yeah,
there is parking allowed there, and it's a huge hazard, especially in the summer when tourists are trying to figure out whether they're going through a roundabout or a whatever they're trying to go through, and there are people parking. That little section should be a no parking zone as well.
Councillor Carter.
I completely agree with Councillor Wilson's idea of having no parking for at least one of the parking spaces to the right, to the east of that intersection at Pleasant and Main. Because the visibility, if you're going to make a left turn there, it's hopeless, if, you know, to your right as a driver. But I'm curious as to what is the advantage of moving the stop sign inward, narrowing the street there? What does that accomplish?
Well, there's a couple different objectives in teeing up the street. Moving the stop sign itself primarily has the benefit of putting the driver and the stop line where you're waiting far further out. So right now, I mean, you couldn't possibly see past the Airbnb if you're stopped at the stop line. Now people creep forward in order to get to a point where they can even kind of see, but they're well past the stop line by the point when they do that. So, and the reason for that is you couldn't just put a stop sign in the middle of the street without a curb or anything, you know. So there has to be a little curb work to allow that stop sign to be placed way out into the middle of what is currently the street. And then otherwise, the idea with narrowing up just on both sides, the idea with narrowing it up so that it's more of a T, also takes into consideration and I mean, I was guilty of this as anyone, I think anyone who's been here a long time, the wide swings that people have a tendency to take on the Pleasant. And there are 2 crosswalks there.
Yeah.
Not a behavior we should encourage. People should be taking a right angle turn, to take the time to stop, to check the blind spot for pedestrian, and not come across on an angle. The other thing about the curb bump on the other side, adjacent to the Holiday Shoe Company building, is that the out from the parking to the rear of the building has come on almost on a diagonal onto the intersection, and a little bit more curb would allow it to definitively come out onto Main, as opposed to coming out on an angle, which, you know, from a traffic perspective, if there is a collision or an issue with pedestrians or anything, it should be clear that laneway exits onto Main, and that's the visibility that needs to be maintained there. So that's just another benefit of the reconfiguration. And it does also shorten the crosswalk on Pleasant. And obviously, from an accessibility perspective, the less distance people have to hoof it across from one curb to the next is preferable, because it can be quite difficult for some people.
Right. Thank you.
So, you know, I think all of the ongoing programs, the evolving transportation program is one of the best examples of something working well. And I think this is an excellent report. I'm all for the changes on Pleasant Street. I think these are big improvements. We had last year when we had last year's version of the transportation report, Maureen and the staff posted a really elegant communication document that showed some of the changes through the town, the one-way, changing Parish Street to one-way, and a few of the other changes. I think it's important whenever we make any changes like this, we really need to communicate them well, because, you know, I think these changes are very well thought out, but it's good to keep it ongoing and ongoing.
Usually might suggest you go as far as saying, like, make a motion for staff to be directed to do another one-page insert type document about upcoming transportation improvements, and maybe throw that in there with the motions.
I think that'd be wise. The one question I have about the Pleasant Street change is really around the sidewalk on the Bank of Montreal side, or, you know, Dr. Ernst's house side, depends on how long you live here. Who lives in
Getty's.
Dr. Kenny's,
Dr.
yeah,
Kenny's.
exactly. Fair enough. I trust, just looking at the diagram, that the sidewalk is going to go from Main Street on Pleasant Street, and it's going to go all the way up onto the parking lot entrance for the Bank of Montreal rear parking lot entrance. Is that a fair view of that survey? Am I reading that correctly, Dylan? Or
Well,
maybe not all the way.
survey is showing the edge of the road, and I just put the curb showing the edge of the road, so.
is it curb or
Actually-
curb or sidewalk?
So that's just to depict the curb, but I think, so if councils gives the go ahead with the redesign, I don't want to spend any money unless, you know, we had a general agreement. We have an engineering firm attached to the intersection of Edgewater and Main, so I think it would be a small thing for them to do up a more proper sketch with respect to, you know, is this an actual sidewalk? Where's the curb? Where does it taper off? Stuff like that. But I think the bigger thing, besides getting council's approval, would be to reach out to that property owner, because I think that their use of the side of their property could actually be
Improved.
you know, improved or encumbered by what we do. So we should probably coordinate with them. It's not really a significant pedestrian walkway. I wouldn't want to give the impression to people that there's any, you know, benefit in staying on that side of Pleasant. The sidewalk's on the other side of Pleasant.
Only.
But those are just sort of
only to get to the bank,
final
yeah.
details that would be worked out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. The last comment, sorry, Mayor, is I think this has been an excellent conversation. Back to our meeting around the council policy last week, where we talked about, you know, speaking to items before a motion. And we talked about how in our normal practice, when we have a staff report, this is the cadence we normally use. Like, so we've been having I think a fruitful conversation. It's been time well spent, but we don't have any motions on the floor. And I think that's normal standard practice for this council, and it's effective. So I think we had this conversation last week. There was some debate about whether we should continue with that, whether the policy and the council policy was really written the way we act in a normal meeting. This is how we act in a normal meeting. We speak to we talk about the staff report versus waiting for a motion. And I think it's perfectly fine the way we're doing it right now.
We're flexible.
And I think we heard that this afternoon in our session that we had, that make your council rules as opposed to always Roberts.
And I like it.
Oh, I'm glad to hear somebody other than me said that.
Yeah.
But there are two recommended motions, and then Councillor Feeney did hit on what might be another one.
Councillor Kerr.
Before we get to the motion, just to comment on accessibility, and I don't know if I'm misinterpreting the diagram here, but it could look like there is a curb cut, but the accessibility curb cut. If I'm interpreting this correctly, it looks as if it's on an angle. Is that, I'm just making a pitch for when it does come to recreating a sidewalk there, that the curb cut for the accessibility not be angled, because it shunts wheeled vehicles into the traffic, so that it be
You mean for the laneway?
Be
Is
for-
that- Yeah, you mean for the laneway, for the laneway exit? Is that what you're thinking of?
No, to get up on the sidewalk there.
Get on the
The fire
sidewalk.
hydrant.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, those will definitely be straight in line with. the
straight
sidewalk.
along, yes.
So there is gonna be another curb cut for the laneway, and that is gonna come further out.
Right.
So the thought there would be, from an accessibility perspective, we'll have more than the requisite 6 feet leading straight to the crossing.
Mhm.
And then on the road side of that, there'll be a dip for the laneway to exit. So, because that is what we're supposed to do now, not, we usually don't have more than 6 feet to work with, so it's tricky, but in this case, we actually would. So you should be able to come straight down the street across the crossing and not be interfered with at all by the laneway out, is the intention there.
So was there concern about snow piling in that area?
It's been raised because we do typically pile snow there. It's not a great place to pile snow in the first place. But certainly, we'll have to take into account that we're not gonna pile snow on
On the
an
side.
active surface of maintained sidewalk, so depending on the configuration there, there may be, it may cut off only room for a little snow, but it should only be very temporary measure to put snow there anyway.
Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd move the council directs staff to proceed with the recommended tee up of the Pleasant Street, Main Street intersection, rather than the three-way stop as previously directed.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Carter. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Thank you.
Mayor, as well, I direct staff to carry out an assessment of the location of the accessible parking spaces and no parking zones, and to report back to council in this regard prior to the issuance of the 2023 painting tender.
Councillor Carter seconds the motion.
And in discussion, I've already got a note about a no parking.
You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
And Mayor, I'd move the, oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Mayor, I move the council direct staff to prepare a communications package for the community that outlines the changes that we've made this evening.
Which is the upcoming transportation.
Upcoming- Yeah, the upcoming transportation.
So that would happen
Study.
after the parking.
I'll leave it.
Parking study done.
Well, I'll just leave it in staff
Actually,
chambers to figure out.
yeah, leave it, if you're really looking that way, it might actually be a good opportunity to get some public input with respect to the no parking zones and and accessibility spaces. I checked with Jonathan how long we have, because I'll always say, oh, just throw in a little public input, but I think there's probably time, if we could get the communications thing out within the next couple of weeks,
Mhm.
to then have anyone who's coming to us saying, you know where you really need to put one, so. I like to-
Fairmont.
Yes, just about that staff report. What is the status now of the reconciliation crosswalk? Does
So
that?
that's still on our list. I haven't, this report didn't, I just wanted to know, because I wasn't here for the conversation, that as the traffic authority, one of the two things you guys wanted to check into, as a traffic authority, I'm supportive. Now, the other part, consulting with local Acadia First Nation, is still outstanding.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'll come back.
Okay.
Have you a seconder for council for Feeney's
I think
third motion?
I think Penny-
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I thought Penny didn't know.
No, it is good.
Is you more through as well, Councillor Carter?
No.
Okay.
This is just something.
Sorry, I should have beat you to it then.
Okay, so we're on our third motion.
Yes.
On the motion. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right,
One more.
yeah, one more item, the staff report on accessibility audits.
So this one is pretty straightforward. It's good to see some motion on this because it's been on our budget now for 2 years. Obviously, coming out of the Lunenburg County Accessibility Plan, we've intended to develop a local accessibility action plan. I will say that's coming to the expectation is our next meeting with Ellen presenting. A lot of great work she's done on that. A lot of work has been done on that by our staff. I think it's going to be a good document. It's going to take years to fully implement, but one of the first and most actionable pieces, because obviously it just comes back to even more stuff that needs to be done, is the accessibility audits of town facilities. So working with our accessibility coordinator, we identified an opportunity for funding support. We've had $25,000 budgeted for the conduct of audits. Looking at the list of facilities that Devon is responsible for, I don't think that will cover it. So we have an opportunity to leverage that money up to 2/3. I actually said, yeah, it should be 2/3, so up to $75,000 with no additional monies from the town. It would just be a matter of okaying an application to the community accessibility program and seeing if that works out. The appendix provides a list of the facilities we were recommending be included. Obviously, there's a certain set of skills that is common between various outdoor recreational facilities. And given the newness of our new fire station, you know, that facility has gone through a lot of scrutiny. And given the province's rollout of different accessibility standards, you know, there may be more to come and more value to waiting on some of those other facilities for a couple of years. So anyway, this is our recommendation. The council directs staff to apply for community accessibility program funding. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Carter.
Of all the recreational facilities, I noticed that Jubilee Park was not included on the list. And was there any consideration of including Jubilee Park on the list?
It is meant to be, I guess, under Jubilee Park Playground, there's a note that just says the remaining wilderness section. So that is intended to be included here. I'll make sure that is included in the scope.
What's missing?
Just
Park.
under Jubilee Park Playground, and it says 42,000.
The playground, yeah.
At the bottom, it says the remaining wilderness section of Jubilee Park, including walking, cycling trails, is 12 acres. So that is an additional component. There's not much infrastructure to audit in the rest of the park, but it would be included, or my intention would be included.
Or there may be things that could be done to enhance accessibility, either.
Yeah, I think it'll be more in that vein.
Yeah.
You know, like if we're doing future development, approach it in a certain way.
Councillor King.
Mayor, I think that is a comprehensive list of community assets. I guess I'm a little lost in the vernacular about what we're contemplating in the audit. What are we spending money on that adds up to $75,000? Like what is this not only, is this also design? Like what's encapsulated under the umbrella of the audit?
Yeah, I guess trying to think of when we've had an energy audit, you might have been on council at the time when we had to do those. There's been an accessibility audit conducted by Ellen on the comfort station, so that would be a good example I could share. But basically, what she's done is given, you know, initial assessment, short and long term recommendations, and it's deficiencies, but also improvements. As we did with the energy audit of the building, it would be things from like change out your light bulbs to you know, replacing the boiler system and things like that. And things are priced, you know, costed. So you're typically being given a whole, you know, package for each of these properties that says, here's the immediate deficiencies you're gonna have to rectify. Here are things to consider if you're putting, you know, future investment into this facility.
So this is predominantly labor to go into a comprehensive.
So somebody would be walking around making a
Report.
lot of notes, and then an engineer would be looking over that, and the report would be quite, you know, I'm expecting substantial package for this, like 100-page package for this report.
And do we?
I can't say if it'll be $75,000. I'm still waiting on a confirmation of external costs, but it will be more than 25 and less than 75,000.
And is that something we would tender for?
Yes,
Or you
we
reach
would
out-
need to tender for it, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just informally, well, Ellen is informally getting a good estimate that we can feel is pretty confident based on. We'll still have to tender if we get the money.
So when you say accessibility, are you talking about raised sandboxes in the playground and like a wheelchair friendly swing? Are those all part of it, or are you talking pathways?
That'll both be part of it. And as far as the playground, I think, like I said, there'll be deficiencies. So where the current equipment fails to meet accessibility guidelines, and then there'll also be, but you could, you know, consider installing these type of improvements that are, you know, common best practices. You know, a lot of it is barrier free. Like our playground has a lot of movement barriers to just get from one piece of equipment to another and move around the playground because it's not, you know, it's just grass. There are often cases still wooden barriers around a piece of equipment and that kind of thing. And so those type of deficiencies would be covered right up front, but then also, you know, additional best practices.
Okay, is there any, for years and years, I took part in town planning sessions where we have asked for like a defined pathway from the swimming pool to the tennis court, where children are on foot on a regular basis, and there can be heavy traffic now with the, you have the fire hall there. So I don't know, for 30 years, I've been going back and saying we need to define from the pool up to the tennis court, eating a granola bar, not really paying attention to what's going on. But there's a lot of traffic in and out of that area. The tennis court now goes in a different place, but the children would still be doing a shortcut. They're not going to walk around to Hawthorne Street and walk up the hill. They're going to take the shortest path, and they have 5 minutes to get from the pool to the tennis court and vice versa when their parents plan for them to go back to activity. And that has been long overlooked by council and planning, where I know the 35, 40 years that I've been advocating for it. And it has been brought up over and over again, but it just doesn't seem to be in the planning, and that somehow be looked at in this accessibility.
So I know it was looked at when the parking lot for the new station was being designed. So I think there's a good way to do that would be to say, include in the scope of the accessibility audits, interconnections between the different facilities. So just kind of leaving it to, if you're looking at where people are parking and how they're accessing these facilities, or how they're accessing them on foot or a bicycle, how are they then making a connection between, the pool and the ball field, or the playground, or the tennis court? So I just say interconnections in between and leave that open as a, but this is an idea that we've certainly talked about. I think it's funny you say 35, 40 years, because I remember walking from swimming lessons up to the tennis court, and I remember walking along the back fence and throwing all the tennis balls that you find in there back over. And so, yeah, people are still doing that today, and it still isn't a particularly accessible route. And I think that the swimming pool is going to have some significant accessibility considerations that get raised. So let's get it in the hopper with that. That makes sense to me.
Thank you.
There is a motion.
And again, this motion is just to look for the funding, and if we get the funding, we'll actually talk getting this thing in.
Merit, this is, I think, the cost of doing business to identify problems and get in a report so that we can apply for other funding to solve the problems. So I'm assuming if we're going to spend this kind of money, that we'll get a really comprehensive overview that'll last years. It strikes me this is a lot of money, however, but anyway, that being said, I would move the council direct staff to apply to the community accessibility program for funding to support the conduct of accessibility audits for town facilities.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Carver. On the motion, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Okay. Let's go to item 7. Council items. Clerk, I assume for 7.1, we have no new.
Yeah, there was a memo sent to council, not as a public document, but Councillor Wilson has a recommendation to make.
Okay,
Yes, I'd like to move that council appoint the following citizens to the following committees. Asset Management Committee, Nick Pavlinick. Climate and Environment Committee, Amanda Montgomery. Community Local Development Steering Team, Nick Pavlinick. And Planning Advisory Committee, Helga Baxter.
Councillor Carver.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. On the question.
Your worship, the deputy mayor has his hand up.
Okay, his hand is up, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, on the, I could have, I guess, discussed that the motion has been approved, but so when the appointments to committees were done, I was not around, and I one of the committees I've been assigned to is the Heritage Advisory Committee, and I think it doesn't sit well in terms of just my availability, and so it would be a disappointment for council if I'm still on it and not able to attend, like some of them are. And I was sort of wondering if somebody else has an interest in that one, because I probably might not be able to participate based on when they meet.
Sure.
Your worship, this information has come through, the deputy mayor mentioned this to the staff resource for that committee. And I know she's hoping to put an agenda item on that next meeting tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I think from there we can figure out if that makes any difference, and then come back with the maybe bring that discussion back after the HAC has had an opportunity to discuss their meeting schedule. So I'm not sure if the deputy mayor's caught up on that yet or not. It's sort of unfolding in real time, but that's our plan at the staff level.
To reschedule the meeting.
To have a
The
discussion with the HAC to see if that's something that anyone's interested in, or
Or rebalance, whatever.
Deputy mayor's not gonna get out of it this easily.
Well,
Well, the offer still stands. If somebody is more interested in HSC,
I got you. Don't worry.
I wonder if we could finish the vote on the report from the nomination committee on citizen appointments.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that. I thought this was part of the discussion.
Well, I think that sideways discussion was about council appointments, whereas the motion is pertaining to citizen appointments to
It's
committees.
just a committee.
Still fits on the agenda item, but not on the motion.
On the same.
Right,
Okay.
correct.
On the motion, all in favor? Motion is carried. We're back to the deputy mayor's discussion.
Yeah, the timing of the HAC meeting's not at all helpful to, it doesn't align at all with the deputy mayor's work schedule. So we're either going to figure out if we can move the meeting schedule to be more so that it can accommodate his schedule, or we'll come back and find some, and we'll swap, facilitate a swap between the deputy mayor and somebody else to sit on the council. So we have an HAC tomorrow, and we'll have the conversation and then follow back up with the deputy mayor and figure out what the right next steps are gonna be.
Have we identified an opportunity when the deputy mayor might be able to participate, or?
Not yet, but I think Kelly's got it in hand, so we're hours before all of the pieces will come together, but don't worry. Kelly and Mo have got it, we'll get it figured out.
Deputy mayor, you okay with that? Okay. All right. 7.2 Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee appointment. At the last mayor's deputy CAO's meeting, the proposed candidate was identified, and the mayors that were in attendance at the meeting agreed to bring it back to their respective councils. And so they had some people left over from their last applications process. And it is proposed that Jean Fay be appointed to the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee for a term of 3 years. Councilor Herbert?
So move, your worship, and just a suggestion to check the spelling of Jean Fay's name. I think both her names may have been misspelled.
Okay, we can mention that possibly, or
Second the motion.
Councilor Wilson seconds.
Amen.
On the question for the motion, all in favor, motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to committee reports, the Policy and Strategy Committee of January.
This one, 7.3.
Oh, Councilor Feeney.
Mayor, if you recall, this is coming out of our discussion last week with the McLeod Group.
Yep.
The McLeod Group and Tina Henniger facilitated an excellent meeting at the
Very good.
M Home Base Center last week.
And I would note that all of
Last Thursday?
council Was that?
all the councils there, and we had a full house as well. Based on some information that came out of that conversation, of that presentation, I think I would have a slight amendment. If you'd indulge me in the motion, this evening is the council direct staff to consult with the McLeod Group and identify appropriate national flags to be used at future events that will be held in Mahone Bay to welcome the international health care workers who will be joining the Mahone Bay nursing home staff.
Thank you.
So, and just to speak to the motion, the edit.
Councilor Now seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. So there was just a nuance on the fact that several of the candidates may be coming from a variety of different countries. And we just wanted to have some level of sensitivity towards that, but I'm sure between staff and Tina, they'll be able to make the right selections, and in the fullness of time, as that contingent gets identified and nailed down, then this, I think, is a respectful thing to do.
Would a United Nations flag be suitable?
I'll leave it with staff to consult with Tina, and I'm sure you'll figure it out.
National from your
Yeah, fair enough.
motion, just to give,
Even better.
I was kind of wondering the same, and I mean, I don't know, but I was kind of wondering the same thing with respect to the flag we're currently flying, the African Nova Scotian flag, on account of we're welcoming these new residents to our province. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly take Tina's advice, but I think there may be a number of different approaches that would be appropriate.
Well, I guess at the end of the day, we'll leave it in capable hands and
Okay,
leave it at that.
so we'll leave it at that.
Deputy Mayor's.
He's our resident expert.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm deeply disappointed in Joe Finney's change from a Kenyan flag as a Kenyan.
I wouldn't take it personally. I'm sure one Kenyan flag will be procured as well.
No, but I just wanted to, I think it's a good move to sort of consult Tina, and maybe hopefully she will consult the folks who are coming, because flags can have different meanings for different people, and you would want to have that nuance captured before you start flying a flag that actually rubs people the wrong way.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're not, Mayor.
heard me?
Think we can move on to a vote on this?
You think so?
I think so.
Everybody's ready now? Okay. All in favor? Okay, motion is carried. Okay, so that's the Kenyan flag, and that's that. Let's go to the Policy and Strategy Committee of January 30th.
And even though there isn't a highlighted motion in there, I think 4.3 agenda for next meeting was a recommendation to council. Oh, I guess there's two. For kindness meters was also a recommendation to council. If somebody wants to make those.
Councillor Carver?
Yeah, well, I'll make the motion then, that council directs staff to complete an inventory of kindness meters on town property.
Seconded by Councillor Feeney. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the Wilson motion.
Sorry, Mayor, which item is this?
This is the 4.3, the agenda for the next
Fair
round.
enough.
From the Wilson motion. That the committee recommended the council set the agenda for the February 27th meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee to include the employee conduct policy and respectful workplace policy.
Okay. Councillor Now seconds.
Can't wait.
On the question? All in favor?
Discuss.
Motion is carried.
Only way to get them off the list.
Yeah, boy,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's-
we'll have an agenda for the
So that'll be a short meeting.
Okay. There's no new business. So we're going to be going in camera. And we have 3 items. One is under MGA 22-2G. One is 22-2E. And the last one will be 22-2C, personnel matters. So before we close the meeting to go in camera, do we still have some people at home watching?
We do, and we have a couple of questions. I'll go back to the questions.
How many are out there?
There are 12 watching right this second.
Ooh, good one.
One question is, what is the ETA of upgrades to the sewer/water system on Main Street?
Well, I can briefly speak to that. It is something that council had prioritized in our recent funding applications to the provincial and federal levels of government. If we were to receive confirmed external funding, the intention was to be in design work in 2023-24 and have groundbreaking taking place the following year. So that would be in the spring of 2024 at the soonest to actually see construction. And we'll have to make an announcement if we can confirm receipt of external funds to say that is officially the timeline for the project. So stay tuned, I guess is the short answer.
Soon as we know, we'll share it.
And then the second question is, oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to say who the questions were from. The first one was from Anya Holloway. This question is from Tony Sampson. Please answer the question why you refused to move the first row of panels back as my wife in consultations with engineers suggested. This would have alleviated the drainage from the beginning.
I think we'd have to ask Area and Lenta and the experts that we had what the reason for that deferment was.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can comment in that, like, the total area available for this facility generation is limited. And the reduction in the available space owing to that would have been fairly significant. So the decision facing council became one of substantially reducing the output from the facility and thereby reducing the community benefit of the facility. And it was not a direction that was approved.
And that was a significant part of the change, was in the output capacity of the.
It would have resulted
Overall
from the request in
installation.
this case, yeah.
Okay,
Those are all the questions that are online.
okay. So we wait 60 seconds in case somebody has a follow-up or. Don't clock up there.
No, it's just.
Mayor, I move we move to proceed to a closed session.
Okay. Well, thank you to the folks at home that had been joining us on YouTube. We thank you for your attention, and the minutes of the meeting will be available online. Do you have any, can we give them a day, clerk, that they would normally be available?
I think I defer that question to the CAO on that.
Well, I mean, it'll certainly be approved at the council's next meeting. They'll be posted in draft form between now and then.
Okay. So with that, we will say good night to our watchers. And we will disconnect our in-camera feed or our feed so we can go in camera.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, just before we do that, I'm assuming Councillor Finn, you were making the motion as the mayor had outlined it to go into closed session, discuss legal advice eligible for the solicitor client privilege contract negotiations and personnel matters as permitted by the Municipal Government Act, sections 22(2), G, E, and C respectively, but is there a seconder?
Seconder, Counselor Now.
Thank you. Sorry, I needed that time.
9:10, Counselor Kerwin.
So do we leave this meeting now, or do we stay on to include the deputy mayor?
Yeah, we get it.
Also,
Oh, yeah.
Still say on Zoom.
We stay
You
on.
see on Francis,
yes, I'll,
We'll disconnect from you.
yeah, we'll sort that out in just a second once we go offline.
Okay, so we can take a 5-minute break while that disconnect happens.
Mm.